All right, it's 3 past the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, my name is Annie Bohlander. Thank you guys again so much for joining our webinar today. We're going to be talking about 2 of our features of our upcoming Skuid Spark release. We're going to be talking about ink components and our app templates. So I hope you're as excited to learn about them as I am to tell you about them today. Just by way of introductions, I'm Annie Bohlander. I'm a pre-sales solutions engineer here at Skuid. I've been working with Skuid now for over 3 years, 3.5 years-ish, but I've been with the company for 1 in my pre-sales role. So prior to joining the company, I was actually a customer of Skuid. I'd just like to share that because, you know, I loved the technology and the people so much at Skuid that I decided to jump on board. And it's been a great year ever since. So lots to be excited about with the Skuid Spark release in particular, and even more specifically, looking at ink components and app templates. In our hour together today, we're going to do a dive into these great new capabilities of these features, and we're also going to have some time for questions at the end. And you also see my contact information here, so you can always get in touch with me after the webinar as well. In terms of an agenda, like I said, we're going to talk a lot about the ink components and templates. But before we do that, just to level set, know we have some partners on the line, we have some prospects on the line, we have customers on the line, people of all sorts of different levels of understanding of what Skuid is and how we work. So we just want to level set and do kind of a background on Skuid and an introduction to who we are and what we do. Then we're going to talk about the Skuid Spark release. And all of its core features. So there's 6 main features of Spark, and then we will dive into 2 specific features of Spark, like I said, ink components and app templates. For both of those, we're also going to do a bit of a demo so you can see what those features look like in the product itself and get a sense of what it's going to be like when those are in your Skuid sites, when you get your hands on those and are able to work with them. We'll also save time for questions at the end. I have a couple people on the line that will help with answering questions throughout. So in your webinar window, you should have the space to enter any questions. We'll try and answer those over the chat during the call as we can. And like I said, we'll save time at the end for Q&A as well. All right, so let's jump right into it. Let's talk about Skuid, who we are and what we do. So Skuid is a no-code application development platform that allows you to build any kind of application, specifically business applications that are tailored to how your employees, how your users engage with those applications. Our platform provides the ability to sit on top of any combination of in-place applications, databases, and machines or services, and you can create applications on top of those without writing code for your development process, and oftentimes without having to perform complicated and expensive ETL processes. What Skuid has done in both my personal experience and as an employee here, is I watch this happen every day, is we remove a lot of the barriers of traditional technology, and that's from both a design perspective and also from a functionality perspective. And so you're able to create consumer-grade applications declaratively. That means you're building through drag and drop components, you're building queries through clicks, not code. And this really allows you to build applications rapidly and allows you to also have fantastic iteration ability with your applications, which is going to help you create those applications that are continuously improving and continuously meeting the needs of your users. A little bit about how it works, just to level set everyone in some of the core concepts of the technology. With Skuid, we have a number of pre-built connectors. On the left-hand side, you see many of them here. We're always adding to this list, and we also have some generic methods of connection like REST and OData. Once you've established a connection into what we would call a data source, again, what you see along the left-hand side, you're able to create data models in Skuid. Data models allow you to get to a subset of data into your application layer, and they allow you to bring in only the contextual data, or like I like to say, the right data at the right time for the right purpose. Then that data can be visualized in UI components. So we have a library of UI components that you can use to build your applications. And those UI components have style that's dictated by a centralized UI design. Overarching all three of these, the data models, components, and UI design, is the action framework. And the action framework allows us to build applications that have interaction with them. So instead of having static data on a page, you can have dynamic interaction in your applications. Think of what you would do typically with JavaScript or if-then sorts of statements is able to be done declaratively through Skuid's action framework. In today's session, I just want to point out we're going to be taking a deeper look at two specific aspects of the Skuid technology, and that's going to be the UI components and the UI design, both of which are going to be getting really huge enhancements in the Spark release by virtue of those INK components and the Design System Studio. So why does Skuid exist? Why does it matter that we can build applications without writing code? Why does it matter that you're building consumer-grade, user-friendly applications? Well, it has huge impact on businesses. First of all, declarative development is the way of the future, and it eliminates code debt and frees up your ability to iterate on your products that you build because you don't have to unpack custom code to do so. You don't have to rely on a particular developer and whether or not they stay with the company and have no idea how to unpack what they've done 3 months later or 3 years later for that matter. But we're also incredibly design focused. I've alluded to the fact that you're able to build really consumer grade applications with Skuid, and that's definitely the case, but that comes with huge benefits for a business as well. Better user experience means more productivity, also means less training, less change management, and typically lower attrition as well, because if you don't have to lower your standards of your engagement with applications in your business life compared to your consumer life, there's automatically less friction for your employees or for your partners or whomever you may be building these applications for. Also, harmonized and simplified UI. So we've talked about how Skuid can build on top of a number of different underlying systems. And in fact, it can combine those underlying systems into one user experience. And so you have a single pane of glass across many different applications that your users would otherwise have to log in and out of just to complete a simple task. Again, that's really going to lead primarily to productivity gains. And then the last one, I have already mentioned this one as well, but technology limits gone. This is a big one. So every business has its own way of functioning. Every business is unique. You may be in the same industry, but you may be born out of M&A activity, whatever it may be. We all have our own idiosyncrasies. And so rather than trying to find software or point solutions that exactly fit the needs of your business, those actually don't exist. And so what we find is that Skuid allows you to take out of the box software, databases, etc., and really build those applications that are tailored to how your business functions and how your employees should be engaging with those. Ultimately, I'd just like to wrap this up by saying adoption is the #1 metric for applications. Adoption ends up meaning more and better data, and that is going to let your businesses have better insight and better decision making. And so adoption comes from all of these things that you see here that Skuid presents itself and brings value to. So what's new about Skuid Spark? I'm sure you've gotten emails about this. I'm sure you've heard more about this. We've done several different webinars on Skuid Spark in general, as well as some of the specific features. I'm going to run through the 6 features just to recap. It's a really exciting release. And again, we're going to be talking about 2 of those in detail. But in general, Spark is enabling enterprises to design and build compelling web and native mobile applications across an even broader set of data sources than ever before. And that's all without writing code. So some of the key features. Private data service is going to allow you to connect Skuid applications to data that never leaves your secure private data network. Also with private data service and even using our cloud connectors as well, we're expanding our SQL data source types. So SQL is everywhere in enterprise organizations and even smaller businesses as well. And so we've really expanded our library of SQL connectors, and so we have MySQL, Amazon Redshift, Microsoft SQL, Oracle, and PostgreSQL. Next up is INK components, which will gain powerful new declarative configuration options with these new components. They've been all redesigned from the ground up, and we'll talk a little bit about that more in this webinar today. But they're going to deliver a complete style, customization, and accessibility. And what I mean by that is accessibility compliance with those components. The Design System Studio goes hand in hand with INK components, and is going to allow you to fully theme and brand applications with complete declarative control of comprehensive design systems, components, and styles, and that's without writing any CSS or HTML. Next one is one of my favorites of this release is going to be native mobile. So you'll be able to, just as you would build any web application, you'll go through the same Skuid development process, but you'll be able to deploy those natively on mobile. So you'll be able to create either custom web or native mobile applications for use on iOS and Android devices. And those can leverage native functionality like push notifications, location services, and more. And last but not least, another one we'll dive into today is app templates. So designing, developing, and deploying applications can be daunting, and what we've done with app templates is we're giving you an inspiration or a starting point for where to begin in some common use cases that we've seen in our customers and that we've really developed some domain expertise on as well. So now that we've talked about all 6 features of the Skuid Spark release, we're going to jump right into INK components. You can't talk about INK components without talking about the Design System Studio as well. So for those of you who have worked with Skuid before, like I said, I think we have a few partners on the line as well as existing customers. And so for those of you who have worked with Skuid before, the Design System Studio is a totally revamped version of what used to be the theme, or of what still is the theme. It's going to allow even more granular control. It really changed the game in terms of enforcing good design behavior and consistency. You'll have a lot of ability to really set specific frameworks for your design, but also allowing for flexibility for different nuances to your brand or different nuances to an application, maybe different form factors, for example. And so for those of you who are brand new to Skuid, the Design System Studio, and we'll look at this in real life shortly, but it's a mechanism for providing style parameters to anything you're building. So it goes from everything from fonts to colors to shapes and more, borders, padding, you name it. And because it's set and controlled centrally, it allows you to really have a consistent design framework, and it also, like I said, promotes the consistency. So and scalability. So what that does is it frees up your design resources. So when your design resources can have their output, their design managed in this centralized place, when they make changes, they cascade through every application that's built with that design system. And it allows for really expanded abilities from a design perspective. You can just work a lot quicker and scale a lot quicker from there. So now that we've covered the Design System Studio, let's talk INK components, which are leveraging the Design System Studio. Every single initial core component of Skuid has been updated and enhanced for style, consistency, and control for this new library of components. So all of these, if you're familiar with Skuid, should look pretty much what you're used to. Step component, page header, text, wizard. A lot of these have gotten major upgrades though, and we'll take a look at some of those today, including the table. New components, things like an accordion, so a collapsible container of information. Avatars will make it really easy to have iconography and images in your applications. Alerts and toasts is going to be really helpful for mobile development, and that's going to be leveraged through the action framework. Modal is also going to replace pop-up. So those are some of the big new components, but I will point out there are several aspects of what you see listed here that are simply new ways of visualizing fields. So visualizing the data in your tables or your objects that you're building with. So things like a switch or a toggle, maybe for a Boolean field or a yes/no field. You have radio buttons for pick list fields. Few different things that we'll take a look at, including also some different ways of visualizing number fields. These all sound super simple if you haven't built an application before, but they actually really change the game and give a ton of flexibility in terms of how you're presenting information, and more importantly, making your applications easy to use and intuitive for your users. So the entire library I'll just mention has enhanced responsive behavior. It also has more declarative configuration options that goes for appearance, alignment, and behavior. So those properties on a component have been expanded. You have even more granular control of those without having to customize. And we've also focused more on end user personalization controls for filtering, reordering, and resizing, which we'll take a look at. All of this translates to easier and faster application building. As I mentioned, you have a brand owner or a designer that'll set the theme in a centralized fashion, and that style will then cascade to any application leveraging that design system studio. Then you have your builders, your developers who are building declaratively with Skuid's declarative functionality, and they have an enhanced set of components with even more configuration options where the style is going to be set by that design system studio, and they don't have to be bogged down by wondering how, what number of pixels of padding here, what kind of border there. All of that is managed by the design system studio through those INK components, and they are free to build kind of whatever they need to meet the requirements they have. And then also bringing in that native mobile that's coming with the Spark release, you'll be able to build but also deploy your applications faster, and that's going to be on any medium. So that's going to be web or mobile. I'm going to pause right here, and I'm going to jump actually into a demo of some INK components. So I've switched it up. I'm now in the Skuid product. You should see Skuid top left and design system below. What we're looking at here is the design system studio. Just to give you a lay of the land, in the design system studio, you have what's called variables, and then you have your components, which we all have been talking about, and we all know and love those components. Variables, like I mentioned, go from colors to borders, to opacity, shadows, spacing, typography. And there's all sorts of different nuances. You can have different versions of your colors. One of my favorite aspects of the design system studio is you see these gradients of the colors that have been set. These are actually all set automatically. So I set a primary color for each of the brand colors, and from there, all of the gradients are created for me. Everything that is set in the variables dictates what is available in stylizing your components. So if you wanted a color outside of what's listed here, you'd actually be forced to add it into your variables section within brand color. Here, this includes several components that were existing in our initial core component set, but also some new ones. This filter set will look pretty different from its prior form, and so we'll take a look at that component as an example. And then for any component, the style of those is set in the Design System Studio. So you have default styling for every component, but you also have the ability to create what's called variants. And variants will, for any given component, what is in the Design System Studio in terms of a variant, and that includes default, is what will be available to you in the composer, meaning when you build with Skuid, if you have just this one version of a button set available that's been styled, you will only be able to style your button set exactly like you see here in the composer. But should you have a reason to need flexibility here, should you have a different form factor, for example, maybe you're designing for mobile, you can absolutely create, like I said, a new variant. So I'm going to go to, where'd the one I'm looking for go? I'm actually going to go to modal. Modal replaces pop-up, as I mentioned. We're going to add a new variant here just by clicking add. I'm going to label this one in particular mobile. It's a really good example of when you need additional variants, but you also might need different additional variants. Maybe if you have a different background color of something or a different text color. There's so many different uses of buttons, for example. There's no limit on the number of different ways you can style a button. It's all just centralized in the Design System Studio, again, to ensure that consistency and control. So if I wanted to change the background color of this modal, I could do so. Just want to show you guys again that those colors are determined by those variables that we already took a look at. This particular case, the biggest one I want to change is actually just the width of this modal. So I'm going to say that 320 pixels is the width of all of my mobile modals, and I'm going to save that. And now this variant, in addition to the default variant, which was already here, will be available to me when I build in the composer with the modal component. Now that we've taken a look at the Design System Studio, we're actually going to jump into an example of what an end user will see in a page that's been built with some of the new components. We're going to do two things here. We're going to look at some of the components just in a really basic form, and then we'll look at a quick wizard application for a mortgage as an example of something a little more polished, a little more complete. So as you see here, I've got a few to show you. Up top, before we get to the table, I do want to just show you the new filter component. This one's awesome to me. It's gotten a number of updates. You have personalization here where you can make this filter set vertical, but they also have collapsible sections. You have the drop-down of select and multi-select type filters, which we've always had, but we also have pick list fields can now be shown as a checklist in a filter set. There's also an out-of-the-box reset button on filters. And you also have a switch filter as an option as well. Really good for Boolean or checkbox fields for filtering, anything that's really binary. That's a really good use of that switch component or that switch configuration on a filter. Then down below the table is probably the most powerful component, both in its original state and in its ink state, right? I actually just gave away one of the ways that it's been updated. If you just saw, I'm now used to this new component. One of the ways that the table has been updated is it allows for additional personalization, and it also shows off its responsive behavior when you do that. So if you see that I've been resizing my columns, I can do that as the end user of the page. Can also reorder those columns. Reordering we used to do through the personalization pop-up. That pop-up or that configuration pop-up still exists, so I can still manipulate which fields are in my table, but I have even more control now with the reordering and the resizing. And as you saw, as I resize, the text will respond really nicely and really cleanly, which I can't even tell you how difficult that is to do without this ink component. It can be very challenging. One other aspect I like to point out here is you see my cursor moving around the table. This is an example of the importance of accessibility and how this component has been enhanced from an accessibility standpoint. I can use my cursor to jump around, can also press enter and immediately edit that, save that information. You'll also notice the inline edit has been brought into the field instead of within the row, which I think is a really nice enhancement. But if you did want to have inline actions in this table, either custom or maybe a drawer configured, you can actually even configure whether those are on the left-hand side now or even on the right-hand side, which I think is a really nice feature. I actually had to do some customization at one point to do exactly that. So just an example of additional granularity from a configuration standpoint there. The wizard has really been upgraded in terms of the progress indicator, and the wizard itself has been combined. That used to require some additional configuration there. No longer is that the case. You also have the ability, as you see here, to orient your wizard either vertically or horizontally. This is, again, going to be super important when it comes to mobile. So you can't really fit a horizontal process into a mobile experience, but you can certainly do anything that requires scrolling in mobile. So this is going to be really helpful there. You also see that visualization of a pickless field as radio buttons in this example. We'll see a few more examples of how those fields can be visualized with the new components in another example here. Moving into the list. The list is a great add to the component library. I'm super pumped about it. There's going to be so much you can do with it, and it's really visually appealing and sound like a broken record at this point, but also going to be great for mobile. The list is going to be more of a summary view of a table. It's going to be less transactional, likely going to require less editing of the information. I'm also showing off the avatar component here along the left-hand side. I just have it showing an icon here. And I'm looking at a list of contacts with a little bit of styling in there and just visualizing the information. Just like in tables, you can have row actions. You'll also be able to configure row actions in lists as well. The accordion sounds simple, but the accordion's a really cool, again, collapsible container. I think it's fun. There's definitely different uses for this. I'm looking forward to using that in all sorts of different use cases. So, jumped a little quickly there, but what I did jump to was that mortgage loan application example. I'm going to take a look at this wizard just to see a few more, the components really in all of their glory here, and a few more ways, especially that the fields can now be visualized. We see on this first step of the wizard, on the property step, we see the use of a pick list being rendered as a button set. Button set is another new component, kind of a nuance on just an individual button. On the second step, Kpi tiles, like we know and love, they're built the same way, but we also have the slider for a numerical field. It's also, again, showing that switch component there. If I continue on into this next step, I'm seeing a pick list field now being shown as radio buttons, as well as I have the button set again. So just depending on what's going to be the easiest way to present the information, you now have so much more, so many more options in how to make that easily understood and how to present that in the most efficient or understandable fashion to your users. So that's really why these are important and why these are going to add a lot of value to what you build. In this demo, this is just the output of the mortgage application. So we all know the mortgage process is a brutal one, and yet with a nice UI, a nice UX, and these wonderful new INK components, somehow we made it through nicely, nice and easy, and had a nice summary at the end. All right. So now that we talked about INK components, I am going to jump back into a little more content just about our app templates. So our app templates. I like the story of our app templates. Our app templates were born out of the commonality of our customers, and all of our customers have their own challenges and unique characteristics, but there were always themes to the business problems they were facing, or in many cases, the use cases that emerged in their organizations. And so what ended up happening was you know, we've built so many different applications that were tailored to businesses, but you end up figuring out the recipe for some of these use cases. You end up figuring out what the optimized best version of kind of the baseline process is and how that's built in Skuid. And so what we wanted to do is bring what we've done for our customers and what our customers have done on their own as well, bring those best practices to everyone else and really share them with the community. So rather than starting from scratch, which can be absolutely daunting, when you have some of these app templates and use cases that you're looking into or are familiar with, they're going to provide you great inspiration or a great starting point for what you want to build. You'll have two options in terms of how you interact with our app templates. First is going to be previewing. So when you want to use what we've built for our app templates as reference for your development, you're going to be able to preview those applications in your own Skuid site. And that's going to allow you to easily see the page's backend. So it's going to bring that page and you'll have the developer view or the Skuid App Composer view of that page in your own site. But this data is going to be dummy data, and that's going to be hosted by Skuid. So you'll have no ability to really engage with the data schema or have ownership over that aspect of the app. It's really all about having inspiration and doing some hands-on learning of how the application was built from a Skuid perspective. Second way is going to be installing the app template. So if you want to tactically use one of the app templates as a starting point and have the data in your own account or your own network, you're going to install the application. And we'll walk through an example of installing the application here shortly. But before we do that, here's a list of the 11 apps that will be installable when Spark is released. Anything that's installable is also previewable. Many of these will actually be available directly from our website. Some of them will require you to reach out to your account executive or customer success manager. Couple that I like to highlight here, case management. We all work in different industries, have different business models, but we all have problems to solve. Case management is a great application as a starting point for a process for resolving those problems, whether they're from our customers, our partners, a logistics standpoint, whatever it may be. Partner portal, this is a great one. This is actually what we built for our own partners at Skuid. We've realized we didn't have a mechanism for really engaging with our partners and collaborating with our partners. And so this is, you know, graced by us and graced by our partners. Probably some of you on the line use this today. That will be one of the templates available. Survey app can also be used as a net promoter score. Think of applications to think of it as something like an internal survey monkey almost for your use with your business. LMS is another one, repurposed from what we built for ourselves. So Skuid Learn is the basis for the learning management system app template. And then we also have a number of different sales templates, especially Sales Mobile will be fun. But sales is kind of our bread and butter where we began our journey at Skuid. And so we have a number of different use cases in the sales space. Here's a couple just hero images of those applications. I already mentioned case management, partner portal, survey, net promoter score, and learning management. And now we're going to jump into an example of installing it, because I know that's what you guys all really want to learn. So bear with me here as I just reload a quick page. Okay, so what I need in order to install an app template is going to be two things. I need, and again, we're installing for this demo. We are not previewing, so I'll point out some nuances to that and where you would diverge on the process, but the focus for today will be the installing process. So what you'll need before you get started on installing a template into your own Skuid site is you need a Skuid site of your own. So that could be your company's Skuid site. I obviously have one that is my own personal one, given that my name is in the URL. and you also need an AWS account. If you don't have either of these things, rest assured they are easy to get. You go to register.skuidsite.com for a trial site of Skuid, and you can go to aws.amazon.com/free for a free AWS trial account. So assuming that step has been done, then you will end up in a page similar to this. So at the time of Spark being released, we are going to have a landing page that is accessible from our website that'll look much like this, where you'll have demos that you can click into, some of which will be labeled as available to install, and those are our app templates. So those will be pretty easily identified. You see some of the ones we've already mentioned. We're going to be working with the sales order dashboard today. So when you click into the application, and this will be the case when Spark goes live for you guys as well, you'll land on a detail page of that application template. So here you see a little bit about the application. You'll see the data source. In this case, it's PostgreSQL, my favorite flavor of SQL databases. And then you'll click Install Template. At this point, it's going to ask for your Skuid site subdomain. So if you go to your Skuid site, you're looking for what is sandwiched between the https:// and the .skuidsite.com/UI. In my case, that's just my first and last name. I'm going to type that in here. Hopefully I know how to spell my own name, otherwise we'd be in serious danger. And I'm going to go ahead and click Get Started. Just in case you're confused, you'll have a full URL to view below, and you'll just want to check that with the URL of your Skuid site. Looks good to me. Don't have to worry about the /UI there. I'll click Get Started. It's going to prompt me to relog into my Skuid site, and it's going to take me to a preview